I got the big screen.
You have to do the thing, though. You get to say everything. You probably know it. Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the MSP Cyber Roundtable. I've been really excited about this one because I consider Will and Connor to be friends. Every time I see you guys on the concert circuit, I am happy to, not that I'm not, I'm happy to talk to everybody, but I'm particularly happy to talk to you guys. So been excited for this one. We're going to have a conversation about cybersecurity requirements, which FifthWall is very knowledgeable about, and Phin Security is very supportive and helping folks be prepared from an education perspective to take on cybersecurity insurance in some instances. You do a lot of educating, Connor.
We do a ton of educating, yeah.
But before we dive into cybersecurity requirements and insurance conversations, Connor was talking about 100 grams of protein in a burrito. And I asked him if he gets hungry with that much protein, because if I eat 30 grams of protein, you can pretty much just shut me off for the rest of the day. So I want to know how this works.
So it's not a burrito, but if you're gonna make me state it, here it is. You get 93.7 ground beef, a whole pound of it, cook it up. That is.
Where do you buy from, man? Who's your beef distributor?
The only place, the happiest place on earth. Costco.
Walmart. Oh, okay. That's happier than Walmart.
Costco.
I have another story where my Costco membership got me onto an airplane, and that is not an exaggeration.
I was looking at buying a tank of gas today, and I drove by a Costco, and I literally thought to myself that it may be time to get a Costco membership.
It's like our local Costco is like 25 cents per gallon cheaper than like everywhere around us.
Pays for itself in like 2 months.
Yeah,
one tire rotation.
That's $2.50 per $2.50 tank for me.
They have a tire sale every year. Buy 3 get 1 free. Just the cost of that one tire is double the yearly membership, and then you get free rotations if you bought the tires there.
This is not sponsored by Costco, but it may be.
I sort of feel like an idiot right now for not having a Costco membership.
At the same time, Costco is one of the most overwhelming places because there's no windows. It's massive, and everyone's walking around resting their arms on their carts, and you're just trying to get by, and you can't.
It's a casino for responsible adults. How much are we spending today? I don't know. Walk out with $800.
So you get your 93.7 beef at Costco, and then what? What else goes into this thing?
Cook up a pound of that. Put in a cup, 170 grams. I actually
a whole pound. There's 16 ounces of beef in this thing.
When you cook it down, it ends up being like 3/4 of a pound. Actually, I found that it goes from 454 grams to 350.
You use the food scale, man.
I use the food scale. Yeah.
Are you a MyFitnessPal guy?
No, I have a journal at home, and I put everything in it. Yeah, I track calories, protein, creatine.
Okay.
Macros.
What do you do? What was that, Will?
Macronutrients.
What do you do for your creatine?
I have flavorless powder.
Why do you track it?
Connor, you're so boring, dude.
I'm freaking jazzed.
Why is it flavorless? It can be flavored like anything.
No, I use flavorless powder because I'll mix it into 3 things. My protein powder.
Yeah, I mix it in my protein.
I make oats with Greek yogurt, so I'll mix it into that. Or I'll make.
We also know that your Greek yogurt is unflavored, so you're mixing an unflavored creatine and unflavored Greek yogurt into unflavored oats.
Wait, is that true?
I didn't say this was an easy path, Will. I just said it was the one filled with protein. So the 100 grams of protein, real simple. Cup of Greek yogurt, fat-free. A whole pound of 93.7 ground beef. If you get 90-10, take out the oil by putting a paper towel in. A cup of fat-free cheddar cheese. It's another 90 calories.
There's your flavor. Jeez.
There's your. I actually add. Then I add a cup of cooked rice. I use basmati rice because it's my favorite. And then I put in Old El Paso taco seasoning. Okay. Put that in. Then I'm not done. Ketchup. And you can get fat-free protein mayonnaise. Okay. Like make mayo chup.
It's just more Greek yogurt, right?
What's in the mayo if it doesn't have fat in it?
I don't know.
Eggs.
It's just Greek yogurt.
It might be. It might be. But I put that all in. It's like I think it's like 108 grams of protein, and depending upon which beef you cooked it with, it'll end up being like 1,000 calories, sometimes less.
And you say you eat that across 4 or 5 days?
I eat that in one sitting in roughly 12 minutes. Like, no exact, like, shovel it in, and then I'm still hungry. I'm looking for more after.
Man, you gotta send me some weightlifting tips so I can up my game because,
The Connor diet.
you know,
My diet is eat everything you want and then feel guilty about it after.
Connor's
a-
diet is eat. If it doesn't have flavor, it's delicious.
So,
Just
Not-
like cybersecurity. Perfect transition.
Will's
Perfect
rocking the
transition.
Oh, not yet, my friend. I'm gonna ask you guys a bunch of questions about yourself first. Connor, give us your story, or maybe let's put Will up. We can do a little transition and we'll give you a break for
Let's
a
go,
minute.
Will.
Give us your story, man. Tell us the everything. A lot of people know you as a pretty public figure in the space. I mean, you're motivational. You've got a lot of educational content. You're very active. Give us the background. How did you get interested in where you are now? And just give us some
Yeah,
highlights.
I can give you a real quick rundown here. So I was working as a pastor in a church here on Long Island, and it's expensive to live on Long Island, especially on a part-time pastor salary. So I was like, I got to find another job. So I started working at a local insurance agency in New York. And no offense to any agents who are listening in, but I hated the general property casualty stuff. Like I just didn't love it. I worked there for almost 2 years, and then ended up moving into some full-time ministry and some teaching stuff. I was teaching algebra 2, and then I got
What was your
married,
favorite
and then all of
chapter?
a sudden it's expensive, even more expensive to live on Long Island. So I ventured out to try and find some other work and started working in financial advising, and that was another thing I hated. And as I was looking to transition out of that, a friend of mine approached me and said, "Hey, I work for this company, FifthWall. We do cyber insurance." And I heard insurance and didn't want to do it at all. But I heard cyber, and I said, "Well, I am a self-proclaimed like internet privacy cyber junkie, so maybe." And so I started at Fifth Wall working on the agent side. So we're working with agents, helping them equip their clients with cyber. And as they built out the MSP channel, I was like, that's where I want to be. I want to be working with these MSPs because they're more my people. So I was talking to Wes Spencer, a buddy of mine, and he's like, hey, so 2 things. You got to do the job you were hired to do, but also make time to do the job you want to do. So that's why I got into all the streaming and education and meme wizardry and all that kind of stuff. So like that's where I want to be. I want to be able to help people understand things through the best way I know how, and that's humor and education.
I love it. I've got a goofy question and a serious question, and then we can move on because I know you want to talk lots of cyber stuff today.
How about anything?
What was your favorite chapter to teach in Algebra 2?
Oh man,
I'm saying favorite. Don't give me the most miserable one. Tell me the thing that you enjoyed.
No, actually, my favorite. I really have 2. I love solving, like figuring out how to solve complex exponential equations. So more than just to the power of 2. I mean, we're going real high here. I just love like one of the things I love about algebra as a whole, just to kind of not get too nerdy on it, is
No, get nerdy. That's who we got here. I'm one of them.
the rhythm is in there. So
Okay.
you learn like the basic way to solve one of the easier problems, you can apply that to the harder ones. So it gets really fun because once you help people understand that, you can kind of gamify it a little bit. So I did projects where I had them making roller coasters using graphs and like all sorts of stuff where it was like, hey, as long as you understand how these things work, you can create some really cool stuff. But I loved when you could unlock like I would make a test where it's like, hey, so you have to solve this problem, and then there's an extra credit equation that if you can solve that, you can get like 5 extra points. And if they just knew the algorithm, it's super easy. It might take a while, but it's super easy. So I love that kind of stuff.
I love that, man. Tell me about your interest in privacy because I love privacy also. I think it's important as we move forward from an economic perspective and I don't want to say government, but I'll say it with
Government.
a B, government.
I know Connor and I have talked about this a lot, but it's just the fact that anything you put on I say this all the time. It's funny to me that when I was a kid and the internet was first becoming a thing, my parents would very often tell me, be careful what you post on the internet and don't believe everything you read on the internet. And now I'm the one telling people my parents' age to stop believing everything they read on the internet and stop posting all this extra stuff on the internet.
And stop answering the phone even.
Yeah. So it's almost like this piece where, like, for me, the privacy component, one is stop putting yourself out there, especially like your kids and stuff who have no control over the situation. And the other side of that is like, it's do what you can to kind of not make your digital footprint as well known. Taking simple steps. You're not going to completely solve
Be
problems,
thoughtful.
but doing something like if you're at a coffee shop, turn on a VPN. It doesn't mean you're absolutely secure, but get a personal VPN and just do it. Those types of levels where whatever you can do can be helpful. And I think just for me, that's been a big part of like my family life is, hey, for my parents, for my wife, for my friends, it's, hey, here are some steps you can be taking to kind of be a little more secure and a little more private in the network space, right? So that's just stuff I enjoy doing.
I love it, man. Thanks for sharing. Connor, let's pick it up with you and tell us about your interest in privacy, and then I'll make you give your little spiel and we'll dive in.
The topic that Will was mentioning that we talked about is I'm like expecting my first 2 kids, and I have ranted several times. Yeah. And I've ranted several times on LinkedIn about putting your kids online. Why would you do that? Some of the drawbacks, some of the benefits. More so as, not to really shame people who do share everything publicly. Topic. Yeah. Well, it's twin girls, so not 3 Connors, but definitely the world can't handle 3 Connors, by the way. I am a triplet, actually. So,
wow.
But just talking about in terms of, Connor and the Connorettes. Yeah, we'll start a band.
Those poor kids.
Yeah, there's when you actually start to dig into some of the things that happen on social media and some of the information that ends up getting bought and then sold or just flat out stolen and abused. What's very clear is there's like a host of dangers, not only to yourself, but also your kids. If you're putting your kids' likeness online, essentially what you're doing is you are consenting for them while they're unable to consent that their image, their likeness, they'll be online. And there's no way to walk that back. There's no way to say, I withdraw my consent now. So if your kid or anyone that you're doing, like putting into social media wants to at some point say, I'd rather not have a presence. I'd rather just whatever, not exist on social media. You can't withdraw that. The decision's already been made. The consent's been granted and can't be unconsent. It's like, it's there. So more so to seek to educate is like, hey, I get it. You probably have cute children or whatever, and you want everyone to heart and like and favorite. It's like what I would recommend is something more along the lines of what I do with my family is make a private and a shared photo album and say, hey, do not put these online. But if you have any pictures or if I take any of me with my kids, I'll share them here and you can see them all.
I love that. I think that's really a thoughtful approach. Tell us your career journey really quickly because it's unique and it's interesting. And you do a good job of leading with your knowledge, and the experience comes secondary. And I think it's tremendous and unique. And I have a unique background as well. So I'd love to hear you talk about that journey and what it's been like.
I've read 8 1/3 books a day, 8 3/4, just like the platform. If Kyle Christensen's watching this, he calls me the smartest man he's ever met. And I really don't like it because at some point somebody's going to expect that I am the smartest person they've ever met. And then the gig's blown. And so I say it back. Kyle's the smartest person I ever met. That way it's like, oh, it's just a joke they do with each other. But my background is I've never had a career, if I'm being real honest. The last job that I had that somebody else paid me to have was a server at Red Robin in college. No joke. And I flipped a bunch of houses in college to pay for my student loans, borrowed a bunch of money from some real estate investors, flipped a bunch of houses doing that, lost all my money buying a house that I shouldn't have because, that's a whole nother lesson.
My dad's told me a story like that.
Yeah. Moved back into my parents, had nothing but the shirt on my back. And I was like, I really like that math and that comp sci stuff because I was studying that in college and just didn't want to go worship at the foot of the ivory tower, so to speak. Didn't want to go get a PhD in any of it. And started writing code, ran across a managed service provider while I was doing that, thought it was cool. And then they just started complaining to me that this is what I deal with. This is the tools I have access to. This is why I don't like it. Yeah. And for whatever reason, that MSP complained about security awareness training the most. So the reality is I might be the next AI XMDR company if that's what the MSP had decided to complain about that day. And I said, hey, they ended that call by saying, don't build me something better. Build me a worse tool that's easier to use, and I'll work with you tomorrow. I was like, I can write bad software, I know. So I'm going to go do that. And then worked with that one MSP for quite some time. Hey, can you introduce me to more? Got involved in MSP Geek, got involved in all the Slacks and the Discords on Reddit. And that was 3 years ago that all started, and never looked back.
What was the thing that helped you the most during your little hang glide, so to speak? Because I know I've experienced it as a business owner. There's this time where you're like, I trust myself. I'm going to go off solid ground. What was the thing that was most helpful while you were in that chasm?
Most helpful.
To get across.
I want to say it's two things. One was my mindset, and I can talk about that. The second was my co-founder, Josh. Ended up meeting him in that process, and it's way more fun to do horrible things with another person there, being real honest. And then I could talk about Wes too, because Wes got us into the industry, but I'd literally wake up, and this is no exaggerate, I was at such like a bad place in my life because I went from I'm a 21-year-old kid who's making more money than my parents. Everything I touch turns to gold. To I just lost everything. I'm the only reason I lost everything. I don't know what I'm doing. I only did it for the money, and that's not even here anymore. I don't like it. So I went through this 6 months long just super depressed. Wouldn't get out of bed. Wouldn't do anything. And I woke up one morning. I was like, I can feel like this till the day I die. No one's gonna come save me. Or I could get up and I could do something that I enjoy, which was literally writing code in my boxers in my parents' basement at the time.
Yeah, with some music, rocking some music or something,
There were many nights where it was me, a brick of Coors Light, and a space heater until I couldn't look at the screen anymore. And then I'd wake up in that room the next morning and just keep going. But I'd wake up and I'd say, I'm not letting today make me its bitch. Like I'd literally tell myself that, and then it got me through. So
there you go, man. I love
psychopath behavior.
Tenacity.
From Coors Light to flavorless protein. Connor's journey.
That's the title. Have you been talking to my ghostwriter? That's the title of my autobiography. Well,
resilience, man. All right, Matt. Teach us some stuff.
Well, I just want to take these stories are interesting because I think of the four of us here, I've been in the cyberspace for a long time. Yet, despite that history, Zach, you and I have never talked like Math Geek, but I'm pretty sure these two up there, that way, these two can math me like they can lap me in math. I'm almost certain, and it's super interesting. Like the whole world is like converging on this space that we're in. This problem's huge, right? So today's topic's overall cybersecurity requirements for clients, but I'm gonna just for this little 10-minute lecture here, maybe we're gonna do it in 5. We're gonna get even more specific and talk about requirements of clients that are in the federal contract space. So with that, here we go. So we're talking about NIST 800-171 today, which is super sexy, right? 800-171 among many NIST standards, because NIST has a whole series of them, which I think is news to some people who've heard things like NIST cybersecurity and not realizing that there's a whole constellation of NIST standards that are different. But this one, 800-171, is the standard reference for federal contractors or contractors for federal contractors. Anyone that's selling things to the federal government. It's there to protect the government's what they call controlled unclassified information. So in the DoD space, they might have a little bit more security. When it comes to top secret information, there might be a little bit more security. But 800-171 is required for nearly every government contractor, whether you're selling pencils or tires or fuel or IT systems. So with that, let's just look real quick here at the news this week. And it's hard to get super excited about standards like this, but this is an exciting week because version 3 just came out a few days ago, earlier this week, and it obsoleted version 2, which had been around for some time. The latest, greatest feature in 800.171 Rev 3 is they brought in cybersecurity controls from 4 or 5 years ago. So that's how our bureaucracy moves in the government. So the technical standard NIST 853 version 5 came out 4 years ago, and now the federal contractor requirements are updated. So
a question I would
you know what?
have, how does CMMC, if this is for federal contractors, how does CMMC actually increase or satisfy something else that 800.171 doesn't?
Super important question, actually. And one of the interesting things about 800.171 is it's somewhat of a catalog for requirements for federal contractors. But what the DoD has done with their cybersecurity capability maturity model, CMMC, is they've chosen some of the requirements from this dictionary, and they said these things are required for these contracts. They're absolutely required. You have to have every single thing. 800.171 is the dictionary. So as a result of this dictionary getting updated, what's going to happen is CMMC is now going to have to update its requirements to bring in these new, people have been working so hard on their CMMC the last couple of years, and we're still not like quite into CMMC world. And it's all just going to get shredded because the new version just came out of 800.171. I do want to take a moment to point out something that I think a lot of service providers may not understand. Their clients are oftentimes bringing, hey, can you help me with NIST 800.171? I've got this requirement. I'm selling this thing to the government. I have this security requirement. Can you help us with our security standard? I want to point out here that 800.171 was written by the government to protect controlled, unclassified information. The 2.2 section I pulled out here, I just want to go through those bullets. It does not include things that are the responsibility of the government. It does not include things that protect anything that's not CUI. And this is super important because what that means is if you're a business and your customer is the federal government and you implement everything in NIST 800.171, you can still get owned and the government may be fine, right? But you're still out of business. So from a service provider's perspective, understanding that 800.171 is not the standard for securing federal contractors. It's a thing federal contractors need to satisfy, right? But they also need to take care of themselves doing all the normal cybersecurity practices. So Rev 3 just came out. There's some pieces to 800.171. Just to go over them quickly because sometimes these numbers get confusing. 800.171 is the base catalog. 171A is a guideline on how to assess it. 172 is an enhanced security guide for if the government says that this contractor is a high value target, like as an example, a power plant, right? Could be a high value target. There's some extra things that have to be added in. And again, 172A is the assessment guide for that. So I will just real quick to talk about the changes on Rev 3 since this is new this week. There's been a lot of changes here. So 19 totally new requirements, but 33 requirements went away, right? And there's actually fewer controls. I believe there was, I want to say 110 before. Now there's only 97. So the scoring system that was around is going to be thrown out the door. There was this thing called SPRS scores to figure out how secure your vendors are. The old scores and the new scores now have no relation to each other. Some of those old requirements went away. Some new requirements came in. If you did NIST 800.171 for your client a month ago and you did it on version 2 and they are bidding tomorrow, this is the new requirement set. You need to do all your work again. So This is for every government contract as of earlier this week. So I
The harassment is welcome,
guys, but people need to hear this stuff. I think if you're a service provider and you have 50 or 100 clients, you probably have someone that's selling to the federal government, right? Or they're selling to someone who's selling to the federal government. So a lot of service providers get dragged into these requirements, and it's what questions or comments does anyone have on this federal contract space before we throw it away and we talk about the wider industry?
I have a question on this for sure.
Yeah.
If nobody else does. So in my mind, so you're stating, all right, this changes if you bid on revision 2, you're now behind, you need to update, potentially change a lot of things. 33 withdrawn requirements, 19 new requirements feels like a huge change if you're all the way down the line already with a company or with a client. So a question I'd have for you, Matt, is like, I constantly see not just MSPs, but a lot of people building security programs with a specific, what is now a version of a framework in mind, as opposed to saying, I'm going to build security, and then I'm going to see how that compares to what requirements does this client actually have, and I'll pull in other things as needed. How do you like? I know nothing about the federal contracting space or the federal security space for contracting. Is that how MSP should be thinking about building security programs? Is start with security, figure out how it satisfies compliance, or should it be vice versa?
Well, you asked an important question, which is should we care about these specific security standards when we're building, or should we only use them to chase down requirements after we've built, right? And they're not all equal. Yeah. Not all the standards are equal. Some of them are better to use as foundational guides, and some of them are really only useful they're a lens on whether you're suitable for that industry or not. So here in the US, the gold standard is actually NIST 853, which is the framework that this one was built on. It's also the framework that NIST CSF was built on. So, and CMMC for that matter. NIST has a whole constellation of security standards that all reference back to that root standard. And if you built your security program based on NIST 853, no matter which direction you go, whatever segment, industry, whatever, you're not going to have to recook those things. They're going to be accurate. They're going to be well-rounded. That said, NIST 853 is hard. It's humongous, first of all. And so for many service providers, it's really important to assess who's your target customer, what are the likely requirements I'm going to need across my customer base, and choose something to standardize on. And then add these things on to relate out to these other standards. I usually recommend for most service providers that they look at CIS because it's right size for the maturity of most service providers, and it can relate out to just about any industry that your client might be in.
It's a lot more tangible too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in the DIB, you have to follow something like this, right? But for a lot of other businesses, CIS is a lot more, I think, relatable or at least accessible. But with this, Matt, is there a timeline? Like, is this the kind of thing that's like, hey, effective immediately? Any new contracts? It's not like you have, this goes into effect in July or something like that.
Well, the government's not great at their own standards, but the draft came out last year. This is like the nth version of the draft. It was like sitting on the shelf for like 6 months. It was announced far in advance. Theoretically, the contract officers, when they put the bid requirements in, should be referencing back to this new standard, but contract officers are not all on the same page there. So they're getting educated on this the same time as the sellers, the vendors of the government. So it's moving right now, but as of today, or as of earlier this week, the version 2 is considered obsoleted, and everyone should be looking to move over. The reality, though, is this takes time, and it takes 5 years actually. So even though the standard is the requirements are 4 years old, right? It takes 5 years to go through a bid cycle for many government agencies. So this is going to be a new issue for end clients for the next 5 years. We have to switch from version 2 to version 3.
So it takes 5 years to go through the cycle.
To roll through the contractor
the next
base.
set comes out in 5 years. So cool. Nice.
You and I could talk about bureaucracy and governmental hands on the economy, I think, but that's probably not where this convo is supposed to go. But I can get geared up with you.
But your energy there is not wrong. Like by the time we get through that 5-year cycle, you've got vendors who have just adopted this new standard with requirements that were written 10 years ago.
I think the way to approach this is to use the Connor Swalm method of attacking opportunities and problems.
No flavor.
No flavor, and do it right now and go head first. So if you know this is what they're doing, if you're a service provider and you're like, oh, they're just going to update it. Well, freaking learn it now and then start looking at what they're going to do for the updates. So when they drop it, you can be the person that's already prepared to tackle it all for all those end clients out there that now have a service provider that doesn't know how to deal with it and needs to change who they have.
And you can say all the other service providers who are using what will be the old version are out of date, and that's why they should work with you instead.
Which is true if you go out of your way to be ahead of game.
I will say the MSPs that I see engaging CMMC as a framework, the ones who are successful in it are the ones who are attending conferences around it, who are consistently looking to update their understanding of what's coming, not just what is. And that's a challenge with the government space because it takes so long for these new standards to come out. It's almost this kind of thing where you're like, well, we're looking at a 5-year-old standard that just got updated, right? I mean, if we waited 5 years to update all of our security, we probably wouldn't be in a great spot. So it's just,
especially these days.
Yeah. And I often will say that compliance can lead to complacency just because when you look at something like that, I've reached this standard. I'm at this place. I'm good to go because that's what they told me I need to have. And I think that's what you were getting at, Connor, before is when you're adhering to simply a framework as the standard rather than the guide, then you often will see this response of like, I got to the place I need to be, and that's it. I'm good.
So
go ahead.
I just want to add something in there. Earlier, I talked about how some of these frameworks are better than others for basing your security program on. The ones that are really good as root sources, people never achieve. They are so the bar set so high, it's actually not possible to get there for anyone, right? And so you're always picking the pieces that are most relevant to the market right now, and you're building things as it's possible to build them, right? And you stay on the edge of what's possible, right? And that's where you need to be if you're going to be able to stop attacks. You know, the attackers are certainly moving forward as fast as they can as well.
Yeah, I guess to be on the very forefront of cybersecurity, you'd need an R&D team. You couldn't possibly.
Did you say RMB?
R&D, research and develop. Wait, what? I missed the joke. I'm so sorry.
No, he said D&B. It's actually drum and bass.
Oh, drum and bass. Nice.
Yeah. We're gonna get a D&D going.
Yeah, let's do it.
So
it's true. I got in a very respectful debate on LinkedIn, in somebody's LinkedIn comments. It wasn't even mine, about compliance and security. This guy was saying he really hates the messaging that compliance isn't security. And my statement was, so you hate reality. Like, I don't know how to explain to you. It's like, this has nothing to do with people saying you can't be compliant and secure or secure and compliant. But it's like, what is the goal of compliance? With insert anything, insert your policies, insert your frameworks, insert regulations. What is the goal of compliance? It is to build a compliant program. That's it. And it can't be anything else. You can get security along the way, but I would go through this thought exercise. If you had to institute something that made your company insecure, but achieved compliance, what would you do if you wanted compliance? You would do that because your goal is the compliance. And a stupid example I give is the one that Will shared with me a while ago, which is like, technically you can be compliant with your cyber insurance policy by saying you have ADR, by saying you use Sentinel-1, and then you could leave it in passive mode and it does nothing. So it's like, yep, I'm compliant. Are you
Yeah,
secure? A lot of people would argue that you have a pretty big gap somewhere and you should go fix it.
I love that. Also, from the standpoint of separating the two things from what they are, compliance is adhering to rules. Rules may not be based around security. There's
Yeah.
compliance around tax code. Not it doesn't have nothing to do with security. You could make the argument that the taxes are then used for security of the country. But for the most part, that's not about security. It's compliance around the rules. So being secure and having a security program and having a compliant program, it's a really good point that you're making. They're distinctly different things. Being compliant for the space you're in or the type of business you are or what your government expects of you is totally different from being secure online.
The way I'd phrase it is they have distinctly different goals and potentially different outcomes. It's like
this is some math shit.
We can't avoid in our space. We can't avoid the word compliance, but the reality is what we do in our software is we have. This is if you're trying to get the customer right-sized investing, to make sure that they buy the right security. That's this set of workflows. If you're building your security castle, you're actually building the cybersecurity. You need to go this direction. If all you're trying to do is assess compliance, that's this other thing over here. They're not the same. They're not the same. You have to get the customer to invest first. Then you have to buy the thing. And then sometimes you have to prove it with compliance. But that last part is the last thing that happens. It's not the first thing that happens.
And you may have to do different education cycles on each different thing that you just described, Matt.
Right. So, is your security? I mean, that makes me just think of the concept of like, is your security simply checking boxes, or is it actually protecting you? And I think that's really the question you need to ask across everything. I mean, I've done talks I did a talk in front of the DIB back in October around cyber insurance, and the mere fact that there are cyber insurance requirements that exceed some of the CMMC NIST requirements. So you've got not that they're not there. Like NIST clearly has those things. It covers things like backups. It covers things like patching solutions, but they're not defined enough to satisfy the insurance. So it's not like saying, it's not like it almost says like you need to have a defined patching cadence. Like that's the framework standard. But then you have an insurance carrier who says, high and critical vulnerabilities, we want to see patched within X amount of days. Like there's a lot more meat and definition to that requirement. And I think that sometimes when a person who has to adhere to any level of NIST has then tries to approach the cyber insurance market, they get thrown for a loop because they're like, wait, I just spent all this time getting my security to a place that it fits this standard, and I'm still being told my security is not good enough. What's up with that, right? And I think you bringing up the point that this is that at least level 2 or however you refer to it is 5 years old at this point. You think that's going to be secure in the modern day? Probably not. It's
not only is it 4 years old, but back to, and I glossed over it quickly. Let me compare CIS first of all with 800-171, right? So CIS is a set of prescriptive requirements similar to a cyber insurance form. It says you're exactly doing this thing and you're exactly meeting this goal, right? Within 30 days. Within it's what's called prescriptive. It says an exact definition of what you're trying to achieve. In the 800-171 requirements, particularly in Rev 3, it says something like, well, your organization should have a process to do X, Y, Z, and you should figure out how good you're going to be at that. Now, the DoD might come in behind that and say, well, you figuring it out yourself is not like what we're going to be happy with. You have to now reach this standard. So they'll layer in and say, well, yeah, I know that NIST 853 said figure it out, but actually you have to be 5 foot tall to ride.
So what you're saying is the standards say you have to do something, and there's this gap between them and whoever the auditing body is, whether it's the government or some approved auditor itself. It's like, that's what it says. here's how we actually have to implement it to get accepted or to get by.
NIST 853 specifically has a bunch of insert your own organizational definition of when you've achieved this here, right?
Yeah,
It's
they do it now. It's like, yep. We reviewed our disaster recovery process 7 years ago, and you know what? The floodplains haven't changed in our area, so that disaster's good. It's like, okay.
We have a question here from, and I, not to like bash you guys with more government contracting here. Someone asked about the definition. How does NIST 800-171 compare to FISMA? 800-171 is for government contractors. FISMA is for agency security, internal to the federal government. If you're building a technology system that's going to exist in a agency, it needs to meet FISMA requirements. If you're a contractor that sells stuff to the government, you're going to be an 800-171.
Got it. I also recommend a lot of folks just take a look at CIS and use it as a measuring stick. It's like, also, I talk all the time about competing incentives. It's like there's a host of competing incentives that may exist in complying with your frameworks and cyber insurance. Like vendors, obviously they'll tell you something because they can serve a market wider, but CIS is a group of people. It's a nonprofit that exists to say you suck at cybersecurity or you're great at it. And so that's why I always recommend it's like, take a look at that. I have no idea if you should be implementation group 1, 2, or 3, but the reality is it's like, if you're a bakery, probably don't need a host of things that are in here, but I don't know. Take a look for yourself.
Maybe. I mean, Will brought up the insurance applications earlier and how they're getting prescriptive, and they're getting more prescriptive every year, and they don't change like every month, but the trend is clearly going towards the direction of a specific measure of, hey, are you guys achieving this? You know, and it used to be, it was, are you doing vulnerability scanning? And now, as you said, I mean, what's the language now is, are you scanning and are you doing something about it? And are you patching and within N number of days is the direction, right?
Carriers used to only just do these external vulnerability scans, and they were terrible. Like they'd scan a third-party web domain and say, "Whoa, you're insecure or unsecure," and like that's not even my domain. I mean, that's like, I don't.
Yeah, it's like GoDaddy or whatever.
Yeah, it's weird, right? So, it's a lot of that stuff, and that's where it started. But the interesting thing is, and you brought this up, we have a 4-year-old standard with NIST, and it's finally getting updated. And insurance, I don't want to paint it like insurance really knows what's going on. They're still behind. Like, let's be real. The benefit of insurance is that you have real-time actuarial data coming in as claims get processed. So they're looking and they're saying, okay, wait a minute. Over the past year, even the past half year, past quarter, we saw multiple claims because a client did not have this level of security, and all the ones that had it or didn't have a claim had that security. So we're going to start leaning into this one more. It doesn't mean we're going to require it yet, but we're going to lean into a more in-depth standard there. So you saw that with EDR, right? You saw the evolution. It started with, do you have antivirus? Do you have next-gen antivirus? Do you have EDR? Do you have 24/7 EDR? Do you have MDR? We're going to offer you MDR now because we want you to have it that badly. Like, you're seeing this evolution where they're not just waiting 5 years to make a change. It literally could be annually. I mean, I've had clients where 1 year, you know, they called up the carrier with their agent. They did everything they needed to get the right security in place, and they got non-renewed the following year because they didn't have enough security. Right. And not that they got non-renewed, they were able to renew, but they had to get the right security in place to meet the standard. So the standard changes, you say annually, and it feels annually because that's when renewals are. But it can be a lot sooner than that. The client just doesn't find out.
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Right. Because you have the vulnerability management changes. You talked about EDR's evolution and MDR, but alongside that is, now you have to have an incident response plan.
Yep.
And now you have to have incident lifecycle management, and you need to have notification lists, and you need to, in some cases, you need to retain, although the insurers are sometimes bringing the retention there, right? The responders. And so that's the requirements. This list there has gotten quite deep, right? And specific. And the same thing's happening with in your market, Connor. You know, we went from, are you doing cyber awareness, to, you know, sometimes we have half a dozen questions on that now. It's not, are you doing cyber awareness training? It's, does your awareness training cover X, Y, and Z situations?
Yeah, I mean, CIS is doing that as well, saying the training needs to be relevant to somebody's role and access and the information or the secure, like the sensitivity of the information they may expect to collect or have to handle as a result of their task or their job or their title. I haven't looked at any insurance policies specifically, but in my conversations with Will and several other people at FifthWall, actually, it's like you used to satisfy cyber insurance security training by having a 4-hour seminar once a year delivered by PowerPoint and taking a list of the people that showed up, right? It's like, so all you needed to do was literally make up a list of people, send in a PowerPoint slide that like, yep, I gave it to these people and it was 4 hours long, and that counted. Do that once a year, you're done. Now it's, well, how often do you train? What are the topics? What do you like? Do you test people's efficacy, like their actual learning? How do you do that? Do you have all of those records? It's like now, I don't know. I guess I'll ask. Well, I don't know if those requirements have changed, but now there's a lot of questions as to it's like, how exactly are you doing this?
Well, here's another major difference, though, to that point, Connor, between cyber insurance and let's use NIST, since we were talking about it before. NIST, while taking forever to undergo iterations, at least is unified and has a standardized requirement across the board. Every insurance carrier has different requirements based on their own personal experience, claims history, right? So that makes things really challenging, because you may have one carrier who says, we want to see security awareness training specific to the roles of the people involved. This is the cadence. We want to see that. You may have another one who simply just says, are you doing it? Right? And there's no standardization across the board. And that goes back to what you were saying before about the realities of like, just because you check the box, does that mean you're secure? And we always need to be asking that question. And a lot of the conversations we have with MSPs at FifthWall is oftentimes pointing them in that direction of saying, let's use this as a starting point, but to create the mindset that we are in a place of cybersecurity maturity. We're always evolving. We're always moving forward. We want to know what's coming next, and we want to know how to deal with those things. So security awareness training, just because you can check the box, are you doing enough? Probably not, especially for that in the insurance space, because it's not well defined on most applications yet.
Let me ask you a question about that, Will, because you're talking about the applications and how they're different in different places. And I've been hearing over the last year, increasingly over the last year, that insurers are like almost giving up on application design a little bit. And they're like, telling the agents, send us any application, so you'll have carrier A taking like Chubb and Beasley, right? Even though, they don't sell that, right? And I'm curious, they're not uniform, right? But the insurance industry has recognized that they're bad at this, right? So what's happening there?
Well, there's two things. One, all of these carriers are competing with each other. So if me filling out a traveler's form, and if let's say I'm Chubb, and I'm saying, well, I need you to fill out my app, but the client already filled out travelers. Now there's a chance I lose the business, because now I'm telling them to fill out a separate application. Now, for larger companies, they're going to have to fill out each individual carrier app because of the nature of the risk. But for a lot of those smaller companies, it's probably more likely that the carrier is just going to say, we'll just use those guys' apps so that they can compete. I mean, at the end of the day, it's that simple. But the other piece that I think we want to make sure that we understand is, and going to the math thing again, right? The law of large numbers. I mean, at the end of the day, that's how insurance focuses. So you may have carrier apps that have certain things that aren't so specific, but then we talk about them all the time, those 5 core controls. There's a reason why those are the 5 core controls, is as more and more claims have come through, the law of large numbers has shown pretty much across the board for all carriers that these things matter, right? So it's different from a carrier who says, well, we're going to start requiring, like, to not name them specifically, but we want to see MFA on routers and switches. Like, there's very minimal evidence that specifically is preventing a ton of major cyber attacks. So most carriers aren't asking for that. But most carriers are asking for MFA in specific places, like on email, on cloud services, on privileged accounts, things like that, right? So because those places, if MFA is not enabled, if a bad guy gets in, we're in trouble, right? So it's like that kind of that kind of piece where we've seen the claim data come in. So I think that's part of it is they know what they're looking for on these carrier apps because they've had to compete, and they know, hey, I'm seeing a traveler's app. I know exactly what to narrow in on to make sure they have.
So it sounds like with some preparation, end clients can really, if they focus on those core areas, at least from the perspective of insurability, right? There is sort of this is where the industry's at right now, right? If you're 5 feet tall, you can ride, unless you're large enterprise or you're super risky or something like that, right?
Yeah, but my issue is using that exact phrase, insurability, because that goes back to what I brought up before, that compliance can lead to complacency, right? So I want to go with what Connor was saying, and Connor, maybe you can define this even from the security awareness training or other things approach, right? Is when I approach a client, I don't want them to just check the boxes that are going to get them a policy from some carrier. I want them to be able to check the boxes that are going to make them an optimal risk to the broadest amount of the carrier market that we can. Because now what we've done is we've gotten them to improve their security, not just check enough boxes to be eligible for a policy, right? There's a difference there. We're saying you are either doing just enough to get by, or you're consistently doing enough that when a carrier looks at you, they say, I want that risk because they're doing a lot to protect themselves and they're doing a good job with it. Right? To me, that's the difference.
Different goal.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that situation when you have an end client, an enterprise, right? They're proactive. They're good at articulating where their security investments are, and carriers really want their business, right? It's a great place to be. And if you're the service provider that got them there, because you can tell that security story effectively, certainly you're going to get your client a good deal on insurance, right? Like if the carriers want the risk, that's great.
I also see a common mistake of IT teams, whether that's at an MSP or internal, where when you ask them, how do you know you're secure, they start listing their tools. And while I have no issue with choosing industry leaders to satisfy, your own security requirements that you've come up with or create security, Reg Harnish, who I believe all of us know, would make that statement. He's like, if I ask you security and you start naming tools, I know you've come about this all the wrong way and you have no idea what you're doing. Because security is not the tools that you use. Security is what you actually end up implementing. A tool can get in the way of that. A tool is not the way. It's not where you start, though. It's hard, though, especially when you have industry leaders. This is why I always go back to competing incentives. Is security vendors exist to help you sell more security, and that second piece. It's not create more security. It's sell more security. So whether that's sell more security SaaS, sell more security services, whatever it is. The end goal is slightly different from creating more security. It's about, growth, and especially as private equity makes its way more into cybersecurity and into MSP land. Just be aware the incentives don't need to be bad. They just need to be upfront.
But you end up seeing so many like shiny new security toys. Like you go to these conferences, and Zach, at the very beginning of this call, you actually called it the concert circuit, which I think I prefer over the conference circuit. But
I got my head in fun places, I guess.
But yeah, you're on the conference circuit, and you start seeing like nothing against the vendors themselves, but it's like you have these people really trying to make shiny things that they think are going to appeal to that are going to appeal to the MSPs coming. But it's like, if you peel back those layers, right, there's that old adage of like, you can't put up drywall before you've framed your walls. You just can't. It's not going to work. So it's, and that's something that I think, Connor, what you're getting at is like, if the service you're providing is not secure, or it's not optimal to what's going to provide not just security today, but continually be moving forward to keep things secure, doesn't matter how shiny your toy is.
Yeah. When I walked the floor of Black Hat this past year, I want to say there was no less than 24 companies that said almost the exact same phrase to me. Hey, what do you do? We use AI on our threat hunting process to help you with MDR. It's like, cool. Can you just tell me what that means? And they're like, yeah, we leverage artificial intelligence to help with threat hunting to satisfy our managed detection and response piece that we sell. It's like, yeah, I knew what those acronyms were. I promise. It's like, I have no idea what you're telling me. Is like, you hunt for threats and you manage detection and response. Like, oh no, but don't forget about the AI. And you're like, you put it right there. I can't. And I'm not going to call them out by name, but I was walking the floor of a very large security conference this past year. I won't say the conference and I won't say the company. I'm trying to find it on my phone. I took a picture of their marketing because I could not find, you could not fit the AI into more places. It was like, we use AI and this to help with AI and that. It was like 6 times on their one banner. I was like, oh my, I mean, I think these are the most genius people on the planet, and I'm going to be looking at pictures of them on a yacht, or they have no idea what they're doing.
The irony is that they started AI washing threat hunting almost 10 years ago. And here we are, we're I think 8 or 9 years deep into AI is going to help threat hunting. And I'm still, because it's best practice, I'm still telling end clients, when you buy this MDR service, the more human packed into that service, the better it is. That's how you should be. That's how you should be evaluating it.
I get it. On the one hand, like, there have been countless articles out there now that say, like, if you are not utilizing AI, your business is going to fall behind, right? So everyone's pushing it because they don't want to be the business that falls behind. The problem is, are they aware of their solution, or are they just saying, we have AI that does this thing, right? And so, and I mean, you see even non-cyber specific businesses utilizing this too. And we talk about, on a cyber insurance policy, there's multimedia and liability coverage that basically says, like, if you accidentally slander, or I guess purposefully, but probably not purposefully because that'd probably be fraud. If you accidentally slander another business or talk negatively or misrepresent another business and they sue you, there's coverage for that. I could see AI, someone creates some chat GPT thing description and it throws some other company under the bus unintentionally and they don't know about it, and now they're getting sued for it, right? So it's just this whole thing where it goes all the way back to the security piece. Are you secure, or are you just shiny?
Yeah. I found that picture, by the way, and I'll read it for you word for word. AI/ML powered AI SIM and AI XDR platform augment and automate your AI MSP MSSP security services.
Nice.
I read that. I was like, huh. That's a lot of AI. It's like, I didn't even know Allen Iverson. He played for the Sixers. What is he doing all the way down here in this conference? I don't even see the hoop. I don't see the hoop shorts. I don't see anyone getting stepped over. What's going on?
With all that AI, we probably don't need the MSP anymore, right?
It's just, I recognize there's value. Josh always says something really smart to me that I say all the time, and he's quite embarrassed about. He is, my co-founder, has a background in like trying to do that stuff for the Navy at a startup that was funded by the Navy. And he goes, the novel thing about AI isn't necessarily what it can do; it's the scale at which it allows you to do what is considered novel things. So your statement, Matt, of like, hey, the more people involved, the better. Absolutely. You know what those people should be doing? Finding a way to leverage AI to help them classify things better or understand, intake more information, put the right stuff in front of them, and let the human make a better decision with more information. What it's not is just completely getting rid of the people and saying, we use AI, you're covered. It's like, no, we're not. We watched a lawyer almost go to jail because ChatGPT was like, I promise I didn't make these up. You've asked me 4 times. What happened? It made it all up. So it's like, that's a super pedantic example, and I'm kind of picking on.
I've had some team members in my past where I'm like, "Are you sure you didn't make up these stats?" I'm like, "No, these are real. These are real." And then, boy, I'll tell you, they made them up.
And I might just be a little jaded on this.
No, I agree with you. I'm just making jokes of humanity's fallibility as well.
In the spirit of competing incentives, I'm a venture-backed SaaS company. I'm currently looking at the investment market, and there is actually an enormous difference in the amount of money that a venture-backed SaaS company can raise, the valuation and the terms it can do it at, if you change nothing about your business and add AI to your name and AI to your pitch. Like,
all right, well,
it's crazy.
I know you have to drop right at 3:30, so I don't know if we have time for takeaways unless you want to do yours and just fade off into the night really quickly.
Oh, mine's going to be real simple. It's like, if you find yourself describing your security program by the tools that you purchase, go to CIS, whatever it is. I think it's just CIS. It's not even .gov, whatever it is. Center for Internet Security. Google it. Find it.
.ai probably.
Yeah, .ai. Matt's going right to like GoDaddy.
No, man, he's got it saved in his favorite.
Yeah, CIS.ai.
When he opens his browser, it opens.
CIsecurity.org. I don't need the bookmarks.
CIsecurity.org. That's the CIS guy right there. Go there, use it as a measuring stick, figure out. You can still name your tools, but name it from a place of they help create security in these ways, not we use these tools and by that definition we're secure. There's my takeaway.
All right, man. Cool. Well, if you have to drop, we will not be offended. But Will, do you want to do yours? And Connor, thank you for joining us, man.
Yeah, I gotta go. Thanks for having me, Matt. Thanks for having me, Zach. Good to see you, Will.
See ya. Yeah, I think my takeaway, I've said it a couple of times at this point, but I think the key takeaway for me is don't let the framework be the standard for you. Let it be the starting point. It's called a framework for a reason. So use the framework to get an idea of the direction you should be moving in for your security, but never be satisfied. Always be asking. I know budget plays a factor, right? It's like we're not made of money. We can't just implement every security control out there, but be asking, ask your MSP. If you're an MSP, be setting budgets with your clients to say, how can I keep maturing? What can I be doing to keep moving forward here? Because if we just satisfy the framework, then 5 years later, we find ourselves still having just satisfied a 5-year-old framework.
Matt, you want to give a quick one, and then I'll run us down the old slide?
Well, I mean, clearly we need to shove AI in more places here. I mean, that's all I learned today.
Hey, watch your mouth.
For real though, yeah. I mean, the requirements are changing all the time. We need to be set a course, right? We need to set a course. You need to communicate with your clients about what you're prescribing as advice for their investments, but you also need to learn from them about what are the requirements that are being put on them, and figure out how you can those basic competencies we talked about, Will, that the MSP has to continue to invest in, right? Just continue to move forward.
Dig it.
Mine is be ahead, man. See what's coming. Don't be surprised. I love Will was like, hey, this is going to happen in 5 years, and they're playing a game and they're thoughtful about what they're doing to the economy. Well, if they're playing the game, play the damn game. Get ahead, use it to your advantage, make some action, and use it to your benefit. Will, man, thank you for being here and sharing your expertise. Matt, as always, it's great to co-host with you. Next week, we're going to be talking about lessons learned from $1 million MSP lawsuit. So I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about expectation setting and ensuring to deliver there. So that'll be a great conversation. We've got our Cyber Success Peer Meetup. If you're interested in joining an awesome conversation around how to tackle this problem, check out our website on how to access that. And we hope to see you next week. Will, I hope you have a good weekend, and I hope so does everybody else. I hope somebody goes on the concert.
It was a blast.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thank you.
See y'all.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.